Hello everyone, Jessica here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel and blog. So today I'm actually skipping out on the stamping of this stamp image just because this video is a little longer and I'd rather show the coloring rather than the stamping. But what I did was I stamped out two of the Flora stamps from the Ink Road, and the two larger ones almost fit perfectly together when stamped at a diagonal. You can kind of see those going right through the middle there. And what I'm doing is I'm taking a B91 Copic marker and I'm coloring the whole background. And then I'm going to go through with a E81 in ivory and fill in all of the floral images. And this color scheme actually came from another YouTuber that I follow. Her name is Jessica also. And she posted on her Instagram page of a vintage fabric that she has, and it had a light blue background with like a ivory colored flowers that were black outlined. Basically just like this, but I'm going to kind of mix it up a little bit and make it my own. So now I have a B95 marker and I'm going through in all of the small spaces and just darkening that up. This is just going to add a little bit of contrast. You know me, I like my contrast. Gotta have those lighters and darker shades of everything. And I'm keeping it as close to the floral stamp image as possible. And I'm just trying to darken that area up and maintain the lighter area of the B91 marker that I colored with first. I stamped this actually using the MFT Extreme Black. I've done a little bit of Copic coloring with that one. It does work really well. I wasn't really careful coloring this panel at all. So I was letting the marker kind of go over the black lines, and there was absolutely no smudging whatsoever. Now I take the B93 marker and I'm just making little dots in the lighter area. Just creating a texture basically. Some of the dots are a little larger, some are very small. It just depends on how hard you push down on your marker. Just be careful of the tip. And now I have a E43 marker, and I'm going to go through and just create a little more definition in the floral images and do a little bit more contrast work, keeping that darker ivory color to the line details of the flower and where they would overlap. Now to add just a little bit of color, I have a gold Spectrum Noir marker. I'm just using that on the centers of the flowers. Now the B99 I'm going to use as sparingly as possible and keep that color to the very small areas of the nooks of the flowers. I'm using the E77 marker to add more depth and more details to the flower images just by flicking the color from the base of the flowers right where the black lines already are basically, and even some where they're not, where I just want to put it. Alright, so I'm going to cut a window out of this panel. And because I had spent so long coloring it and I didn't want to mess this up, I'm going to use a T-square and a little trick to make sure everything is straight and in the middle and not crooked. Even though if it was crooked, I could start over or try to salvage it in some kind of way. But I think it's best to use all the tools that you have available to you to try to keep everything straight. That way you don't have those kind of mishaps anyways. At least that's what I've learned over the years. I'm going to center it on the glass mat in between the lines, and then I'm going to use the T-square to help center the die onto the card panel, and then die cut that out with my Big Shot. To back it, I'm using an 80-pound piece of Nina Solar White cardstock, and I used a pencil just to outline where the image of that little rectangle is going to be. That's easily erasable, and then I can stamp that in the middle of that outline. I'm using my Versamark and I'm heat embossing that in gold with my heat gun. Right now I'm using gold embossing quite a bit, but it's so pretty. Now going back to the Copic coloring panel, I have a Versamark pen, and this pen is the exact same formulation as the ink pad, and you can actually emboss with this pen. So you can draw, you can doodle, you can do some lettering with this pen and then use embossing powder to emboss just like you would with the ink pad. I don't use this a whole lot, but it is a fun little detail to use. And what I'm doing is just coloring in the centers of the flowers. I'm going to do the top left hand portion first, and then I'll do the rest, just so that the ink doesn't have any chance to dry before I emboss it. And I'm using the gold embossing powder again to make everything cohesive. Alright, so after the heat embossing is all done and everything's cooled, I can just take my eraser and erase those pencil marks around the hello sentiment. And then I'm going to use the foam mounting tape, the stuff that I don't really like, but I have a lot of, so I'm trying to get through it. I said that before in another video. This stuff, the backing paper, is a little hard to get off. I struggled with that first half, and then I remembered that I have tweezers that will help me. So I used those, and it did make the job a little bit better, but you'll see on this last strip of what happens. And that happens on almost every single strip, so it just gets a little annoying. Now I can place that Copic colored panel right over the hello sentiment panel. And this is your last chance to make sure everything is lined up. So you have a little bit of leeway there. And I hadn't refilled my ATG gun yet, so I'm going to show how I do that real quick. I've been using this ATG gun, this exact same one, for, I can't even guess how many years. A long time though. And I've gone through so many rolls of tape. I think this is the best adhesive for me to use. It's bulk size. I don't have to do a lot to it. It's a relatively good price point, and there's not a whole lot of waste. I mean, everything's recyclable anyways. It's all backing paper and then a small piece of plastic, so I like it. I always use it on a piece of scrap paper first before I take it to the project after refilling it. And then I like to line up my cards upside down so that the top is actually on the bottom, and line them up that way. And the reason for that is actually because if one panel is larger, or if one panel is longer than the other, you can snip off the bottom part if need be. So if my card base was for some reason a little longer than the Copic coloring panel, I could just trim off the excess after adhering it to it by doing it upside down. If I aligned it from the bottom and found out that the Copic piece was shorter than the card base, then I would have a fold to deal with. And you can't just cut off the top part because of that score line. So that's just a little something that I figured out over the years that makes it a little easier for me every single time, because I've made that mistake before. So for the inside of the card, I'm going to use a couple more of the stamps that are included with the Bella Flora stamp set from Ink Road Stamps. And it simply says, "You're kind." I like to make some generic ones, ones that don't necessarily say happy birthday or thank you or, thinking of you or anything like that. So I stamped those in the MFT Extreme Black ink, and then I'm going to layer over one of the smaller floral stamps using the Simon Says Stamp Fog ink. And I made a little mistake there at the top. A little bit of the black ink got onto the lid of the stamp platform and kind of smudged onto the card. So the easiest way for me to deal with something like that is to take the Signal White gel pen and just layer that over the black mark. You can still see it, especially if you are looking for it or if you know it's there, but I don't think the recipient is going to care. They're not going to point it out. So as a last step in this card, I'm going to add some Crystal Nuvo drops. And these are in, I believe, gloss white. And I'm just going to scatter the drops throughout the whole front panel of the card. And that's it for this one. I'll have a list of all the products used on my blog. Any videos or anything I've mentioned specifically, I'll have linked down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it. I appreciate you, and I will see you in the next one. Bye! Meh, meh.